For over 15 years, the Martinez family lived like any other neighbors on the block. They paid their bills, went to church, took their kids to school, and celebrated birthdays like everyone else. But behind closed doors, they lived with a quiet fear, the fear of being discovered. They had fled violence in their home country and built a new life here in the shadows. After so many years, they thought they were finally safe, until one cold morning, just before dawn, when the sound of fists pounding on the door shattered everything. This is the story of how peace turned to panic in just 30 seconds. For 17 years, the Martinez family lived in quiet anonymity in a modest suburb just outside Houston, Texas. They blended in. They paid their rent on time. Their children went to school and played Little League baseball. Jorge, the father, landscaped lawns from sunrise to sundown. Ana, the mother, worked night shifts cleaning office buildings. Their lives were routine, almost painfully ordinary, by design. But there was nothing ordinary about what they were hiding. The Martinez family had crossed the border in 2008, fleeing brutal gang violence in Honduras. They had entered the U.S. without legal papers, carrying nothing but a backpack, 2 toddlers, and a handwritten address of a distant cousin in Texas. Their journey had been long, dangerous, and traumatizing, but they made it, and for the first few years they lived in constant motion, hopping from place to place, afraid of any knock on the door. Eventually things settled. Jorge found steady work. Ana picked up more clients. The kids, Diego and Lucia, began school and quickly learned English. They made friends, they got good grades. They pledged allegiance every morning and dreamed in English every night. To them, the United States wasn't a temporary escape. It was home. It was the only life they remembered. But for Jorge and Ana, the fear never went away. Every siren, outside, every letter from an unknown government office, every time the car passed a police checkpoint. It was a reminder that their life here was built on borrowed time. One wrong step could mean losing everything. In 2014, Jorge was pulled over for a broken taillight. The officer asked for identification. Jorge didn't have a license. He was cited and fingerprinted. Although nothing happened immediately, Ana could tell something had shifted. Jorge stopped driving altogether. He began biking to work, 10 miles, each way, just to avoid another police interaction. Years passed. The Trump administration came and went. Policies changed. Rumors of ICE raids spread through the community. Friends were taken in the middle of the night. But somehow, the Martinez family remained untouched. Some said they were lucky. Others believed they had simply become invisible. They told themselves that if they just stayed quiet, worked hard, and didn't draw attention, maybe time would be on their side. Maybe a path would open. Maybe their children, both born here, both U.S. citizens, would be their protection. Then, in May of 2024, a new policy went into effect, prioritizing long-term, undocumented residents with any prior police interaction, no matter how minor. Jorge's traffic stop from a decade ago, once dismissed, resurfaced. His name appeared on a federal list. Ana's too. A technical error in her asylum application from years earlier had flagged her as having overstayed. And just like that, they weren't invisible anymore. On the night of May 17th, everything was quiet. The kids were asleep. Ana had just finished folding laundry. Jorge was making sandwiches for the next day's lunch. They went to bed at 11:30 p.m., like always. At 4:17 a.m., they were woken by loud, aggressive knocking. Flashlights pierced through the windows. A voice shouted, "From outside, immigration! Open the door immediately!" Lucia screamed. Diego ran to the living room in confusion. Jorge froze. Ana's hands trembled. She looked at her children, then at her husband, and in that moment, she knew. The knock they'd feared for 17 years had finally come. Their fear had always been theoretical. Now it was real. They thought they had done everything right. But none of it mattered. Jorge hesitated only for a moment, but in that moment everything seemed to collapse in slow motion. The pounding on the door intensified. The ICE agents outside had already drawn the attention of a few neighbors, some peeking through blinds, others stepping out in robes and slippers, startled by the scene unfolding before dawn. Inside the house, chaos reigned. Diego, now 17 and in his final year of high school, stood frozen near the stairs. Lucia, only 10, clutched a stuffed rabbit in one hand and her mother's pajama sleeve in the other. Ana's heart raced so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Jorge finally took a breath, walked slowly to the door, and opened it, his hands raised in surrender. 3 ICE agents stepped inside. "Are you Jorge Martinez?" "Yes," he answered, barely audible. "Step outside, sir. We have an active deportation order under your name." Ana rushed forward. "Please, our children are citizens. Please don't do this. We've lived here for 17 years, Cray." Of the agents, younger than Jorge's oldest son, looked away. The lead officer, stone-faced, continued reading the legal order aloud as if it were routine. "Ma'am, do you have any identification? We also have a hold on you pending review of your asylum status." Ana's eyes widened. "Asylum status? That was years ago. We never got a response. We've been waiting all this time." "Unfortunately, your application was flagged as abandoned." In those few words, everything they had tried to build began to unravel. The kids started crying. Lucia screamed as 2 agents placed Jorge in handcuffs. Diego instinctively stepped forward, pushing himself between the agents and his father. "Don't. Take him. He didn't do anything. This is his home." "Step back, son," one of the agents warned. But Diego didn't move. "I was born here. I'm an American citizen, and you're tearing my family apart." Jorge turned to his son, barely able to keep his voice steady. "Diego, it's okay. Take care of your sister. Stay calm." He tried to smile. He didn't want their last memory of him to be full of terror. Ana was next. They didn't cuff her, but they separated her from the children. 2 officers stood between her and the kids while she tried to explain. "Please, they need us. Don't split us up." One of the agents muttered, "We're just following orders." The moment the parents were taken out the door, Lucia collapsed on the floor, sobbing. Diego sat next to her, arms around her shoulders, in complete disbelief. The house, still full of breakfast crumbs and laundry baskets, felt suddenly unfamiliar. Cold, empty. By 4:38 a.m., both parents were gone. Neighbors watched silently as the vans pulled away. No one said a word. No one knew what to say. The silence was heavier than the early morning fog. Later that day, Diego called his Aunt Maria, the only family member nearby. She came immediately, barely able to contain her rage and tears. She had seen stories like this on the news, but it had never been this close, never this personal. At school, Diego's teachers noticed his absence. His principal, Mr. Thompson, a quiet but kind man, called home and spoke to Maria. Within hours, the school staff organized a small meeting. By the end of the day, several teachers and students had already signed a petition. "This can't be happening," Mr. Thompson said. "Not to Jorge. Not to Ana. They're part of this community, but it was happening." At the detention center, Jorge was crammed into a holding room with 12 other men, some of whom had lived in the U.S. even longer than him. Ana was kept in a separate facility, with no communication allowed between them. For 2 days, she didn't even know if Jorge was still in the country. For 3 days, Jorge didn't know if the children had been taken into foster care or if Maria had reached them. They were isolated, afraid, and worst of all, uncertain of what came next. Jorge lay awake every night thinking about Lucia's last cry, Diego's voice breaking with rage and Ana's terrified eyes. He went over everything in his mind, the sacrifices, the years of hard work, the silence, the fear. Had it all been for nothing? Back home, Maria was trying to keep things together, but Lucia refused to sleep in her parents' bed. Diego stopped going to school. He told Maria, "What's the point? If I work hard, get straight A's, go to college, and one day they still take everything from us?" It wasn't just a family that had been shaken. It was their entire identity, their sense of belonging, their belief in the American dream. But unknown to them at that moment, something was already beginning to change. The story was spreading. A post from Diego's friend went viral. The local church began organizing. A small group of people, teachers, lawyers, neighbors, started asking questions. And someone had found an error in Anna's old asylum file. Something ICE hadn't expected, something that might be their only chance. The viral post started with a simple photo. Diego holding his little sister in front of their now empty home with a caption that read, "My parents were taken this morning by ICE. They've been here for 17 years. They are good people. Please help us." By the end of the day, the post had been shared over 30,000 times. At first, Diego didn't even know what to hope for. He wasn't trying to start a movement. He just didn't know what else to do. But what happened next surprised everyone. Local reporters showed up. The same church that Anna cleaned 3 nights a week organized a prayer vigil on the front lawn of the Martinez home. Diego was asked to speak. Shy but composed, he stepped up to the mic and said, "I was born here. I've never known any other home. And my parents have given everything to this country. All we want is to stop living in fear." His words were honest, raw, and they struck a chord. People from the community began showing up. Former clients of Jorge, neighbors, teachers, even strangers. Someone brought sandwiches for the volunteers. Someone else made flyers. A family lawyer, Ms. Rios, who had seen the post online, offered to review their case, pro bono. And that's when she found it. In Anna's asylum paperwork, filed back in 2008, there had been a bureaucratic error. The court had sent a hearing notice to the wrong address. Anna had never received it. Her case was marked as abandoned by default, but legally, that was a procedural violation. Ms. Rios gathered every document she could: evidence of employment, school records, letters from the church, the police report from the gang threats back in Honduras. She filed a motion to reopen Anna's asylum case on the grounds of due process error. Meanwhile, she submitted an emergency request to halt the deportation proceedings for Jorge, citing family hardship, 2 citizen children, and strong community ties. The next few days were excruciating. Jorge and Anna, still in separate detention centers, had no idea what was unfolding outside. Jorge thought they were being forgotten. Anna worried their children were being placed in foster care. The silence between them was unbearable. But on the 6th day, Anna was called into an office. A different ICE officer, this one more gentle, handed her a phone. It was Ms. Rios. "Anna, listen carefully. I filed a motion to reopen your case. The judge has accepted it for review. That means your deportation is temporarily paused." Anna broke down in tears. Her voice shook. "What about Jorge?" There was a pause. "We're working on him now. But the community is behind you. You're not alone anymore." 2 days later, Jorge received the same call. And for the first time in over a week, they both cried tears of relief. Their deportation wasn't canceled, but it was frozen. They had a window. A chance. By now, local media outlets had picked up the story. Even national platforms had begun to report, "Texas family faces deportation after 17 years. Community rallies to save them." The support continued to grow. The school held a fundraiser for legal fees. The church organized food donations for the kids. Diego returned to school, this time not with fear, but with purpose. He gave a speech in his government class about the rights of immigrants. Lucia wrote an essay titled, "My Mom is My Hero," and then a breakthrough. The judge handling Anna's reopened case issued a stay on her removal, allowing her to remain in the country until the full asylum process was completed. Jorge's case was harder. The 2014 police stop complicated things, but thanks to the overwhelming evidence of good moral character and family dependence, a second immigration judge issued a temporary suspension of his deportation, pending a formal review. It wasn't freedom, but it was hope. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, the Martinez family had a voice. They had advocates, they had allies, and slowly, they began to rebuild. Anna returned home first. She opened the door to find Lucia asleep on the couch, with her stuffed rabbit still in hand. Diego jumped up, ran to her, and held her for nearly 5 minutes without saying a word. Jorge came home days later. The neighborhood stood outside waiting. Someone had placed balloons on the mailbox. A sign on the front lawn read, "You are not alone." He didn't say much, he didn't need to. He just hugged his wife, then his children, and closed his eyes. They had made it through the worst night of their lives, but the journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. They had lived in silence for so long, always watching their backs, always lowering their voices, always assuming no one would care, or worse, that people would turn away if they knew. But what Jorge and Ana didn't expect was that when the knock finally came, and the silence was shattered, people ran toward them, not away from them, away from neighbors who had once only exchanged nods now held their hands. Teachers who had only seen Diego as a bright student now saw him as a leader. A community that once felt indifferent turned into a shield. The Martinez family learned something powerful. Sometimes it's not the system that saves you. It's the people who refuse to let the system destroy you. And this story isn't just about one family. It's about the thousands like them living in fear, raising children, working quietly, hoping for mercy, and wondering if their existence will ever matter. But if this story has taught us anything, it's this: they do matter. They are not invisible. They are the people who fix our roofs, cook our food, care for our children, clean our hospitals, mow our lawns, and teach us the meaning of resilience. And in return, they ask for only one thing: a chance to live without fear. So if you've made it to this part of the story, ask yourself, would you stand in front of a house like theirs? Would you speak up for a family like this if they lived next door? Or would you stay silent and hope it's never your door they knock on? The Martinez family is still fighting. Their court dates are coming. The legal process is long. Nothing is guaranteed. But now they're not alone. And that changes everything, because fear is powerful. But community, real, human connection, is even stronger. They thought they were safe. Then ice knocked before dawn. But what happened next proved they were never truly alone.